Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to a good friend, Josh, again. You may recognize Josh's voice. He's been on a few episodes, and actually it'll be a total of 3 after it comes out. So he's been on, there's the Hatcher Pass, Alaska episode, I believe Westland, Oregon. And Josh was in attendance at the Sasquatch Summerfest festival in Oakridge, Oregon this summer. So we were able to hang out at the booth there, and I was able to do a mini interview with him that was in a compilation episode that came out on August 29th of this year. So Josh, it's a pleasure to talk to you again. How's it going up there?
Oh, it's great. It's great. It's like a lot of just a lot of activity going on. It's been like, you know, ups and downs and all that stuff, but it's been pretty good. Everything's really mellow here. Yeah, so far so good.
Absolutely. You're out in Oregon still, right?
Yeah, I'm still in Oregon, out in Westland. Lots of, I mean, there's a lot of activity just in general, and I got so much to cover. I've made a bullet point list, but
before you get into it, did I tell you about the person who came up to my booth when you weren't around? I don't know if I got to tell you this. So this one lady came up and she was like talking about your Westland episode. And she's like,
really?
You know, it's the weirdest thing because I've actually had stuff happen to me up in, I think it was North Portland, where she's like, it's an area people wouldn't think, but, you know, I had stuff happen in that area. So I get what he's talking about, you know, places where you might not think it's still going on. So I thought that was kind of cool, but you weren't around at the time, so.
Oh, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like this whole area, it's like an interlocking like corridors of like forested areas, and like, you know, it seems like they're highly like just adaptable to like whatever environment, and they'll still be able to find food where they need to, and some of the young will grow up and like they only know that kind of food, and what I've learned is like, I've been leaving nuts out for them recently just to sort of smooth things over and all that. But I put out a fish, and they were like, they didn't want to eat it, and I buried it in the garden. And after it rotted for a few days, and that's when they dug it up and started eating on it, and like, but they didn't want to touch fish. But I know in Alaska they eat fish, and there's videos out there where they're like in the creeks looking for fish or whatever. But it's interesting that like you talk to people like what's the name of that orchard? It's not Woodburn, but Sherwood. There's an orchard in Sherwood. It's like a U-pick orchard, and like I went out there and they had clearly had like a family of Sasquatch on the property, and you just chat them up and you find out that like a lot of the ranchers and a lot of like the people around here, there are encounters, and it's interesting. It's like some people know, a lot of people don't still, but it's the only way to sort of get the conversation rolling is just, you got to talk about it, you got to bang the drum.
So Josh, so you're saying that you went to that area and you were talking to the people that own that orchard, and they were like, yeah, we got them around here, or
Yeah, they had a family of Sasquatch move onto their property, and like they alluded to, like they would just come and eat the apples and whatnot every night, and they just do their thing. And they'd learn to like sort of live with them. And they had like the orchard was well manicured, well taken care of. You could tell it's clean. They wanted it to look good for customers. But then there was this patch where it was like weedy, and like they like took a couple of passes with the lawnmower, and they didn't want to do anymore. And all the trees were scraggly, and like the bark was peeled, and like you could hear the whoops coming from them, and like the rocks clacking, and like the activity going on that you would hear with like Bigfoot. And like this is just me hanging out, just looking at the apples we just picked in just their little parking area, and I'm like looking over, and I just like chatted him up, so like made a joke about keeping the Bigfoot off my apple tree, and then like it just snowballed from there, and like he just sort of segue into it. But like according to her, people in the know say that they've been like coming in for like the past like 20 years, like into the closer, encroaching in on the cities more. But you know, who knows? Maybe they've just noticed it, but maybe they've always just been. I assume they've always just been here, and like all the developments that have happened have like encroached on their territory, because it just seems like they're just sort of comfortable where they're at, and like you wouldn't think they need that much, but like all they really need is like a good bush and some water and some like bugs or nuts or something, and they're set. And yeah, they just come out, do the big hunting at night, but like all they really need is water and like a spot to hide. And there's a lot of it, you know, so it is interesting.
Is that pretty close to Westland, the same area?
Same general area. I would say it's like headed more towards the coast, but it's like, well, like 30 minutes away, like a 30-minute drive or so. Like
Gotcha.
It's still part of the same sort of sprawl, like interlocking sprawl. So it's like it's just on the other side of like Tigard, I think just south of Tigard. So not too far at all. Like I can take side streets and get there. But they've had him on the property, according to them, for like 11, at the time it was like 11 years, so probably like 13, 14 years now of them dealing with the Sasquatch and just sort of coexisting with them.
That is really, really interesting, Josh. I might have to look into that. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it would be worthwhile.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be worthwhile to go pick some apples and like as like your cover, but then like check out the
right,
the Bigfoot right there.
Right.
Oh, hey, I'm just gonna go take a leak or something.
And it's kind of like like two birds with one stone. You get a great bunch of apples to make a pie or whatever, and then you get some Bigfoot interaction as well, which is, I mean, that's solid. That's a solid day out for me. So,
I mean, that'd be a good thing. You know, you get the Oregon Sasquatch tour. You get like the best, like this orchard and that orchard, and like this place and that park. You know, be a tour guide.
It's after spending some time out in Oakridge, it's stories like this, like, you know, it's like, yeah, no question. I mean, after experiencing stuff in Oakridge, where it's like there's stuff going on so close to the town, it's like, yeah, the Pacific Northwest is crazy. I mean, like, any Bigfoot person knows that, but once you start experiencing it for yourself out there, it's like, yeah, it's a whole different story. And you had some other stuff happen out there in Oakridge that you didn't get to share on the episode that came out about maybe about a month or so ago.
Oh yeah, I should just jump into that. The essentially I had talked to Dwayne. He was on previous episodes with the Oakridge stuff, and like he was at the festival, and I got to chat him up, and like just listening to his stories, and like him describing like he was looking at Oakridge, like the ridge line that was facing across the river from the park, like I was looking at it. Like it was like he could hear them like swinging through the trees and like moving around and like just like I could. And then as the sun was setting, you could really like see the twinkling eyes of the juveniles and like the adults trying to just sort of like herd them in as like the wildfires are just raging. And what Dwayne said is like they're going to be really geeked up because of the all the smoke and the fire, so they're going to be really active and really aggravated. So be careful and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. But like you could see it. Like it's in like it was like so apparent to most of the people there that oh yeah, Bigfoot. Like it became like super casual. Like instead of like this incredible moment where you should be just like taking it in. Everybody's like, yeah, Bigfoot. Just like super almost taking it for granted, like what we were experiencing. But the what Dwayne had told me, he was like at that park he had a lot of run-ins just at the little campground there, and he says there was a male on one side. So I go and where my tent was like essentially set up, but I go down there and I decide to just there's like a little bridge. I crossed the bridge, and I was like, once I enter the woods, my ears are like on. I'm like listening, and I'm like, I got my feelers out. I got my peripheral vision. It's like heightened awareness. So I just like slowly, quietly like walk up to the forest, the park, and just start walking in. I didn't get more than like 20 feet before I heard like about 3 juveniles starting to like follow me in like maybe like 30 feet off of the trail. So I knew that was the spot. So then I saw that there was a rock outcropping that was like just next to the bridge. So I backtracked, went to the outcropping. I just stood out there on that rock outcropping, and I just stood there and looked in their general direction. And then I heard another one come up. It was like swinging the trees up on the tree line. It was knocking rock down the cliff. And I looked up at it, and like I could hear the sound. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them, and they were moving in close. I just let them see me, and then I gave little, a turn just so they could see who I was and let them know that I know about them. And then I was letting them just see me. And I think it's like a courtesy that they like to do. You just let them see you, and they'll do the same for you. They might be from like a distance or like next to a tree in a shadow, but they'll let you see them, like the Vikings would do. It's probably related. You never know. But I did that, and it was fine, And that night I passed out and all that jazz. Or I was about to go to bed, and I was in the tent. And I'm like sitting in the tent, and I hear like the big male come out, just thud 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 thud, and he sniffs me, sniffs my tent. I can hear him. I'm so like close, and like it's just like uncomfortable. I was like, oh, I don't like this. And like then I hear him like after he's done sniffing at my tent, he starts like milling around in the grass looking for bugs or whatever, and then finally he starts hupping rocks into the creek looking. I'm assuming for crawdads or something, and like I was like, okay. I unzip the tent and I just walk to the truck. I sit in the truck, and like as soon as I sit down, I'm facing the ridge line, and I got that feeling like somebody was watching me, and so I just like instinctively look, as we all would do in that situation, you do it at the grocery store or whatever. You just look over at somebody and they instinctively like look at you. I did the same thing, except this time it was a female and she was up in the tree and her eyes lit up, and there was about 3 little juveniles like hugging this tree. And so suddenly I the guy that knew who they were and I knew where they were, even though they were cloaked, I suddenly became a threat. And it wasn't like I was trying to stir up anything else. I was just trying to like go to sleep in my truck, and just have a little like cut it off for the night and not cause any trouble. And like I stepped in it, so I immediately, like maybe like a couple seconds, like right then and there, she lights up her eyes and then she ape swings through the tree line, just like her eyes are just like orbs, just like flickering through the tree line like a straight line. She goes, or maybe 100 feet, stops, and then like a couple of seconds later, the male is like, his eyes are lit up and he is like darting back towards the tent, and then I lose sight of him, and then like he starts messing with my truck that night, and like they ended up getting a print off of it, and like it was a crazy night. So the backup to that was like, while they were the next day, while they were trying to get a print off of my truck, the sun was starting to set, and then like I was starting to see a lot of twinkles up in the ridge line from the other parking lot, a much bigger one, more open, like parking area, and it's like not just like a couple of twinkles. I'm talking like a clean like 75 to 100 like sets of eyes, and they were like cloaking in and out. You could see the light as like they went gray and like had a flash of light, and then just little arms would like swing in and like climb up into the trees, and they're getting to the tippy tops of these Doug firs, and I'm guessing there's some of them are ponderosas or something, but just like 100 little sets of eyes, and they're all like clustered up. So all of a sudden, they're like stop and like looking at me, right? So I'm just like on the side of the parking lot next to like the venue. Everybody else is inside watching like one of the new documentaries that one of the researchers had coming out, and it's just sort of me just like just looking up at this, just experiencing this. You got a blood red sun as it's setting, smoke's in the air, like bright flashing eyes, like twinkling, and like I pull out like a military, those military flashlights, those big,
Yep.
crazy bright ones. I flash them right at the top of the tree line just to give them a couple of blinks, just to see what would happen, and they all go black. They all shut their eyes, and they stop. And then at that moment, I see like a smoky figure like come out of cloak, jump from one tree that was directly behind the stage, overlooking the venue. Apparently, the big male had been up the tree, like casing me, like keeping an eye on me. I'm guessing probably through the whole event, just like he was like my chaperone, if you will. But like he hopped to the next tree, this little maple, and scaled down it, and I could see him just like his arms and stuff just like coming in and out of cloak. And then all at the very top of the fence, I got to see his eyes, and they were like big black eyes, but I could still see into the pupils of his eyes. You could see the discoloration of some of the his iris and stuff, and like had like a silvery little ring just at the inner part of the pupil. But he was just like looking at me directly, and we were both locked eyes, and it was just like an intense moment where I knew I'd like messed up. And so I was like, okay, just like don't freak out, just let him see you, just look at him, He's letting me know not to do that again without like causing a scene. So I'm like, okay, understood. And then he like hops down, and I can see his like the figure as he slides down into like the riverbank and starts moving towards like his side of the river over by my camp. So I'm like, I'm thinking, great, now I gotta deal with this guy. So towards the end of the evening, after everybody was like kind of like bedding down, I head towards my camp. It's super dark, and like I decided I gotta pack up all my food and just get it out of the camp and put it in my truck. And so I did that. And on my way back, I could tell that he was like right on me, just right on me. At the embankment, it was super pitch. I couldn't see the river. It was sort of blacked out, and you could just feel, you could just feel when they're there and they're watching. And it was that moment. And so I just decided to like make a peace offering, make sure I don't just disappear in the middle of this festival. So I just pull out pecans and like a couple apples, and I just take a big old wad of pecans and I throw it down the little trail that in the black sort of shadowy spot. And I let the apples roll down. You hear them roll down, but then I heard them like hit the dirt, and I could hear him like just start like snacking on those pecans, and it was, guess he liked them, because at that point I ended up saying goodnight, all right, and I go to the truck, and instead of facing it towards the where I was parked before, I parked in the opposite direction, so I wasn't facing the female with the little kids. I was just going to be like facing away, facing the highway, essentially facing the parking lot, and like just sort of like cut it off and not get in too much trouble. And like, because I gave him those nuts, I guess he decided to just show himself to me. And so like about 1:30 in the morning, I like sort of wake up, and like I see him. He just like, or actually I don't see him. I hear him first. At first I hear like what I think is him. It's just a cat. It's like a stray cat wandering around. Like a few people saw it, but this cat was wandering around the area, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess he's gone. So I ended up just listening, and I could still hear him sneaking up behind each tree. So he was opposite side, over by Dwayne, actually by Dwayne's like little camp, and like moving from tree to tree. And then he slinked up to the bush right in front of my truck, and then he peeks his head out, comes out of cloak just for a second, long enough for me to see him like squinting at me, and he goes back on behind the bush, and then he peeks back. He did about 3 times, and I actually got to see his face, and it was like it pretty clear. I could make out his face, but the thing is, it's like they look just like you and me. Like they look like normal people, but then they have like features that are like, just the eye sockets are huge, right? His eyes were like all the other Bigfoot I'd seen, like the eyes were like kind of protruding a little bit because they're so big. His were set back in his head, like recessed in his head, and like all of his features, like a typical like a like a, I want to say like an Irish looking guy, but his eyes were huge and like really just black, but they weren't like slanted in any sort of way. They're just sort of like straight across. Like normally when you see like the human eye, there's like an upturn or a downturn, and then there's some people that are just like right across the middle. His eyes were like that, but like huge. And there was like a slight wrinkle at the bridge of the nose, and other than that, it was just like a regular looking guy with like big like flat lip or like thin lips and all that, but like he had like I noticed he had like his hair was really short, and which would confirmed my theories about them shedding. And we can get into that more, but like that's what I saw. That was like the big thing from Oakridge.
That's incredible. Were other people? Well, I guess it sounded like most everyone was over by where the documentary was playing. But do you think other people may have experienced anything like that over there as well, or?
So the ladies that were camping next to me, a couple of like special ed teachers, they got to hear like the rocks being thrown into the river because it was making such a funny sound. And it was because like the bubbles were like reverberating and it was making like a like just like a real funny sound because the way the water was going, the speed of the water, and then like I'm guessing the size of the rocks were just like creating such a cavity when they hit the water that you could just hear it like like all the way to the bottom, and like they were hearing that, and then some other ladies like in the other camp on the other side of me had heard like they told me like the next morning that something got the cat that had been wandering around the stray cat.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so my guess is after he was done with me, he went and ate a cat. And, but it's interesting when you see this stuff and then like have like the little details like get confirmed, like how the rock sounded, and like the stray cat is like slinking around. I think I was the only one that had noticed it, like other than when it was like in the actual like area where they're showing the videos. But that was like it was nice because like it wasn't like me just having like a waking up from heavy sleep or something and like just like hallucinating or something. But yeah, it's interesting, but like no, not too many visuals. Some of the documentary people from what's that?
Flash of Beauty team.
Yeah. A couple of them, they asked me like what was going on where I was when I had the encounter the first night, and I just told them it's like I was told them where the truck was facing, and I like pointed to like the general area, and I told them just look for the flashing eyes, you'll see it. And then they just stood there for a second. We all stood there by the bench, looking across the river, and there it was, like the three little juveniles, and then like a flash of the female, and then she was gone, and then there was like actually like 5 or 6 more littler ones, like real tiny ones, just farther back in, but like they're all kind of in the same area, and there was just like a lot of little babies just all over that hillside, and they were like finally getting to like see something, like the flashing eyes. I'm like, well, they're like, oh my gosh, that too, and they were getting excited, and it was nice to like have somebody like acknowledge, and then like let me like show them, and then like something happened, It's like one thing when you tell somebody, but it's another thing when you can bring them to the spot and like it just like the magic can happen for you, just enough for them to like get excited. It felt really good.
Yeah, that is anyway. One of the cool things about that festival, where you can go to like a Bigfoot conference or a festival, or let's say a Bigfoot conference, but it might be like downtown in the middle of the city. But like this one is very unique because it's in a park on the side of a river, and across the bridge of that river, I know I've said this before, but it's the literal wilderness of Oakridge, and it's where most of the town people, when I was talking to people before I got there, like that's where a lot of their sightings actually take place in Oakridge, is across that bridge on the other side. So it all lines up, man. But it's a very unique thing where you can experience that festival, but you also are so close to a potential area for experiencing some things as well. It's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's that line between like being like believing and knowing, and like you know, like you, like I heard you, I got to listen to your little experience with the scream.
Yeah.
Like you interviewed enough people and you believed, and like you had a couple of little experiences, but when you had that scream, there's that knowing.
Yeah. I came back from Oregon, a totally different person. It was very weird. It's hard to explain, but I think that might be part of it. It was just a very cool, but also very strange. And having the having the legs messed up, that didn't help either. So next year I'll try not to do that. I'll wear pants.
Yeah, I just kept looking and I was like, what did he step in? What's that? Oh, I gotta watch out for poison oak. And yeah, you just mess with your legs. I was like, oh, that doesn't look good.
Yeah. The doctors still have no idea, but it's out of there no matter what it was. So who knows?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's some very interesting things that happened around that festival. And I'm actually, I want to say tomorrow, I am interviewing another gentleman who, I guess. So here's the thing about this festival. There were like all these groups of people that were doing things around the area at the same time and having these like weird things happen related to Bigfoot. So there's
really,
there's it's coming out. There's multiple storylines. Well, I guess you could call them storylines that were happening around the same time during this festival. So I'm going to talk to Bill tomorrow, and his will probably be coming out pretty quick after this episode gets released in the future. But so you're planning on coming back in 2025, you think, or should?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
I think so.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm definitely going to be there.
What else?
If next year, if something is going down over there, hopefully I can be aware enough that I'll check it out next year as well.
Oh yeah,
that'd be pretty cool. But
yeah.
So you mentioned you had some other things that you you had going on as well, Josh.
Oh man, yeah. The yeah, I need to talk about Cultus Lake. I need to get that out there.
Absolutely.
This summer, we ended up going on a camping trip out to in approximately the same kind of area. It's like in that mountain range we were at with where Oakridge was, but a little farther down the road and like more inland. So it's like kind of halfway to Bend, but it's a little lake called Cultus Lake, and you know, beautiful little like campground, real spacious, like a lot of elbow room between each campground. I highly recommend it. If you're a Bigfooter, I totally recommend it. But like, if you just like a good like experience with the family in terms of like having a nice big spacious like lot to camp on, it's right on the money. They have boat rentals and all that stuff, and like it's kind of amazing in a certain way. But when I got there, it was like 4th of July. It was like the weekend before 4th of July. And so everybody was like just rip-roaring, just going crazy. And like they were like laughing and drinking, and like there was multiple parties, multiple languages, like people, it was 4th of July season, you know, and like, you know, it's rowdy. Like my wife and daughter are like starting to bed down and it's story time and all that stuff. And like I decide I'm just gonna stay up a little bit and just like sort of like see what's going on. Like I'd like to, if I'm gonna go to sleep, I like to see what's out there and like what's like sneaking around. Because that's when like when the critters come out is at night mostly. And I just wanted to, make sure there wasn't too much like Bigfoot activity, and there's plenty of distractions, so I didn't want to be like advertising that I knew about them. But every time I do that, I end up making it worse. And that's exactly what happened here, because I had just got that flashlight that I mentioned in like the previously just a few minutes ago. And so I wanted to just like see how high I could make it beam up into the sky. I was just like playing with it for a second, like turning it on for the first time, really just like cutting loose, and then like shine it, see how far across the lake I could shine it. But what that did was like it I think I probably looked like a Bigfoot or something, like shining my eyes, beaming my eyeballs, and then one of them came to like check me out. Like immediately, it was like I could hear the crackle in the branches, and there was like a couple in the camp next to me, and like they're like a old timer, like an outdoorsman type. And I think he knew what was going on, but I think he was just trying to have a good time with his wife, and he wasn't about to like just point it out, but I could tell he was tracking it too. But that thing was like crackling through the dry branches. It starts to get really dry when you get over the mountains and like get closer to Bend. It starts turning into high desert, and so we're in that like transition zone, and like all the branches are super dry, and so when they run around or if they're moving around through the trees, it's super obvious, and like they can't really hide themselves very well. But people are people, and they got their own lives, and they don't pay attention to anything even when they're out in the woods. And like I caught a like I actually got I turned off the flashlight, and I was just standing there in the dark for a second, just waiting to see what was around. And all of a sudden I just see like a quarter of like an arm, a chest, and like half of like the midsection, and like the head, like come out of cloak, hanging from like the tree that was in my campground right above the fire pit, maybe like 15-20 feet from me, come out of cloak and like go up into the tree. Like he moved into the tree. I saw him, and then I was shining the flashlight up there just to sort of like spook him off, maybe. I was hoping that would work, but that doesn't work. Just for the record, that doesn't work. But he like just stayed up there, and then he moved to the other tree, and you hear it crackling as he moved up, and he just sort of hung out there, and you could hear the timber just sort of like waning a little bit and crackling in the core, like just like and like just the little twigs and branches as he's like moving up, trying to get into the comfortable position and just wait for me to go back inside. And the whole time, so I just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go inside. And my daughter was already asleep for because it was a big day, and like story time was done, and she was out cold, and it was just my wife. And I get in there and I listen, and I told her what I just saw, and she was still on the fence at that time about all this stuff, and she didn't want to sort of address it, but I was like forcing her to like deal with it, because I wasn't about to just like, oh, no, go back in the Bigfoot closet with you. I just was like telling her point blank, like I just saw something out there, and she says, well, then you just need to stop staying up so late and you need to go to sleep. And I said, okay, I will. But then as I'm laying there, I got to hear, like you can still hear the people still rowdy, and over them, you got to hear like just like identical to the Sierra sounds. So like two Bigfoot were arguing in the background, and I could like it was like the and then that one was like that samurai talk, but over the people like screaming and yelling, and so you couldn't. If you don't know what it is, you probably wouldn't have caught it, but it was like super loud. And I told my wife, "It's like, did you hear that?" And I go, "That's Bigfoot talk." And she like listens. Her eyes get big. She goes, it's not drug people. I was like, nobody speaks that language, I said. and yeah, and like you just hear it, like them like going bantering back and forth, and like either they were talking to each other or talking to the guy, the one Bigfoot that was in my camp looking at me. I'm like sort of like messing around. They probably saw me beam the light, and like they're already like geeked up from like all the people being rowdy and loud, but I beamed the light, and he was checking it out, and they're probably like, "What is it? Who is like just trying to figure out what's going on," because it was like campers and humans are all. It's going to be the same story over and over again. That's nothing new, but when it's something out of the ordinary, they're gonna get curious and they're gonna investigate. And I'm like, they in some ways, like you don't know what they're saying, but you know basically what's going on. There's just certain like idiosyncratic like things that they do that we do. And you just sort of get the gist of what's going on, like without like projecting too much, but you just sort of get the vibe of like them just wanting to know and like arguing back and forth. And then there was that. So my wife got to hear this, essentially the Sierra sounds. She could care less. She wanted to go to sleep. But I was just like sitting there on my knees, just in the tent, going, "Oh my gosh!" And I finally laid down and like tried to sleep and all that. And the next night, we bed down. This time I go straight to bed. I don't want to mess with anything. And like I could, once everybody was like down, and it was a lot quieter. Once everybody was down, I had to go to the bathroom, and a few people left, and so there was like a bunch of empty campgrounds. And I had to go to the bathroom, and I had to walk through with my little lantern, and I could hear him crackling in the trees, watching to see who's coming. But I'm looking straight at him, and I'm just like, I stop just to acknowledge him, and then I go into the bathroom, and I come back. I do the same way, and I can hear him like following me a little more, but looking at me. And so then I go back to my tent, and it's like nothing else happens. But I think it was the following night is when like the action happened. You got some new people come in on either side of us, and they're talking a lot and they're making noise. And like after most people have bedded down and the campground got pretty quiet, I could hear the crackling and then the sound of them like clumping down out of the trees. Like they were in camp, and they all made a beeline for the tent. And there was like, I think 3 or 4 of them just on. It was like at least like 3 of them like in the camp. The female, like I heard them, and I heard like the communication. The female like gives like a tonal like hum sound. So she was like, mm-hmm. And he gave like a long like with like 3 like rattly clicks in there, like click, 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 with a snap pop at the end, and then all of a sudden I just hear a stomp, 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 like a crinkly stomp as he's like on my tarp, just like stomping it, and then all of a sudden it sounds like a little like mouse or something is by my tent. I get confused for a second. I'm like, oh man, what's going on? And all of a sudden I realize it's a finger. And then he starts feeling up the corner of my tent. And then all of a sudden he starts like reaching and grabbing and snatching at the bugs at the top of the tent. We had left the lamp on for my daughter. She's still afraid of the dark. And so he had like attracted all the bugs under a rainfly. And so like you just hear like the sound of like, you know, someone like rubbing the tent, and like you know that whippy rippy sound that like the tents make when they're like rubbing together. But it was just like just me. My wife's passed out, the daughter's passed out, and just me and my pounding heart as I'm listening to all this stuff, because I knew they just made a beeline. I heard one of them like lifting up and like pushing stuff around on the table and like messing with the totes, and it was a little intense, because like as soon as he started like taking stuff, I could hear him like chomping, like his huge teeth and like his massive jaw and like the fangs inside his mouth, and everything was clacking around, but like it was like chomp 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 chomp, like just intense, like horse teeth, like just chomping down, and he's just like was like eating all the bugs out of the rain fly. And I'm like sit up, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then like when I sat up, the female like flashed her eye, like one of her eyes at me, beamed it through the tent, kind of like flashlight, just to let me know that they were there and not to come out. And I was like, oh my gosh, my heart's pounding. So I leaned back and I'm just listening to like these like chattering like monster teeth just like clacking around. The fangs are clapping against each other, and it was so intense. It's so terrifying. And like I wasn't sure where this was headed. You know, it was like, is he, if he runs out of bugs, is he gonna work on us? Like because like it's clearly they know I know, and I'm interesting to them in some sort of way, but I don't know their temperament, if they're like crazy or not, or if they're super aggressive. But what they were doing was super aggressive, because normally they'll keep their distance and like they like to have a tree or something between them, but they were like just like made the beeline. As soon as I went inside, they made the beeline. And yeah, that was enough for me. I was like, I didn't want to like push it any farther, and I sort of convinced my wife that we need to just pack up and go. We still had another night left on our reservation. I wasn't about to hang out for the rest of it, and she was sort of bummed about it. But we packed up and finally left, and like that was Cultus Lake.
Cultus Lake. Did you look around, notice anything weird or out of the ordinary the next morning? Like any broken sticks or footprints or anything weird like that around your tent site?
No, there was no prints. I couldn't see any prints, but I did see chewed branches, like when they chew the bark, they chew the inner bark. You can see like usually the fang marks. I could see the fang marks of them chewing the stripped branches everywhere. And I saw this weird stump in the middle of the camp. And it looked like it had a rock in it. And I actually found a rock that was down on the beach. It looked like it was like a grinding stone or something, or hammer stone. Somebody's using it to like grind stuff with, and I think it was probably their Kraken stone that they used, and they probably used it in that spot. But like I put it in there, and it fit like a glove, like it had been pounded into that stump. like over a long period of time. Like this was an old dead stump, but like it was clearly it had been worked, and it was like chisel marks, and it was like smooth in some parts, but like it had been like cracked with a rock like hundreds of times. And in this one spot on this stump, and it was so weird, because like I was like, oh, I could just put it here, but then I put it there just to like show my daughter, like, and tell her about like Native Americans and like all that stuff, and like how they would grind like things like seeds and stuff, and give her a history lesson, and just like make them more aware of nature and like how to use things and stuff. But then like, but as I placed it in that stump, it just like fit so perfectly, and it was the shape of the rock. And I think it was just their little hammerstone that they used to like crack the nuts, whatever nuts they found out there. But I did notice that like the surrounding vegetation had been trampled pretty well. Like there's still like underbrush in a lot of the forests in that area, but like this section, like you could see like the trees were pushed over, and like there was a lot of like trees that were stripped of their bark, and then like you would see like where there should be like underbrush, it's like all like trampled vegetation, like branches stripped of their leaves, and like clearly they'd been like feeding in there. But like some these kids found what was a little fort made out of like giant logs, and they said some guys were working on it. I'm like, what guys were working on it? But they didn't want to hang out and talk to me about this little fort. But I was like looking at it, and it was like lined with like cedar fronds, and like it looked like a Bigfoot nest. And like what I've noticed about like in here and like just in the Westland in general, like if the kids see one of these little structures, they think it's just a regular fort, and they start like building on top of it and playing in them and stuff. And like, but you can always tell when kids do it, and like stuff's out of place, and it's just like sort of like halfway finished. But when a Bigfoot's doing it, it's complete, and there's like a bed in there to sleep on, and you could definitely like live in there or like get out of the rain. And that's what this little fort had. It was like it had a bed inside. It was right next to the water. It was underneath a clump of trees. The logs were massive. There was like a little big for a camping trip for somebody to say, "Hey, let's build a fort out of these gigantic logs for no reason instead of like just sunbathing on the beach and kayaking." You know, it it was like maybe some guy like maybe I'm thinking like these kids found a little hut, and I'm like they just saw these guys like putting it together because they also found it and thought it was neat, and they were just in there dinking around, probably thought someone else did it. It's always like somebody else, like two people, but nobody's like, no, you never like meet the original. Oh yeah, no, that was me. I did that. It's always like a second. Oh yeah, no, some other guy, someone else, and it's never. So I had a little. Yeah, there was that little fort. There was at the very edge of the lake in our campground. You had the little stump. I went and checked the table to see if they had messed with anything, and everything was like slid back into place. But I could hear them like messing with it, like trying to lift open totes and stuff. But then they stopped, and I couldn't find a single footprint. Like, but I did hear. What I did find was at first thing in the morning when I came out, I found like some of the bug carcasses as they were like sliced in half. Looked like somebody cut it up with scissors. So it was like razor sharp cuts. So like the teeth are razor sharp, meant for like I'm guessing like just like cutting, tearing like meat, you know, and like it was meant for like eating deer or whatnot, you know, just like meat eaters, but like the cuts on the wings were like angular and just it was crazy. It was like super like like somebody hit it with like a little like X-Acto knife or something. Like just clean cuts, not smushed too much, just like clean sharp cuts on some yellow jackets and moths and stuff. It's kind of crazy. But that's about all I saw for like anything left behind.
That's really interesting. So you're saying multiple different types of bugs were found cut apart, not just like cicadas or all one kind.
No, there's all sorts of difference. So what because like it's high desert, there's a lot less water. And what I noticed was like along the shoreline, there's a point where the water lapped up, but it didn't go any farther, and that's you'd see like just a line of bugs. All the bugs in the area were just like thousands of bugs at the water point, just coming to get a drink of water. It'd be bees and hornets and wasps and like moths and butterflies and ants and like beetles and just all sorts of beetles, like species I've never seen before. Stink bugs, just everything, just ants too, just all along this one water line. So I'm thinking they just, for the most part, probably just live off of the bugs and nuts or something, and like tree bark. Get their water. I mean, the food source is there, the water's there, the shelter's there. It's just like it's just interesting because like each biome has its own like niche like food sources.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That is a good point. There's a thought I had. I want to make sure I don't forget it. You've mentioned a few times where you've seen Bigfoot coming in and out of cloaking. When you have them, let's say they're in full cloak, what are the main things that you notice to let you know that, hey, there's something there? It's just in cloaked mode. What are the things that tip you off?
Normally you hear them coming, stepping around. They aren't breathing too heavy. Like they'll hold their breath, but like if they want to move or anything like that, usually you might see just the slightest like parallax, like just a little bit of like just a little distortion, but not a lot. Like no, it's like pretty much crystal clear. Like, but when they move, there's just the slightest little razor thin, like sharp line, and you can usually make out their silhouette if they move just a little bit. The front end will be like either white or you'll see like a black shadowy line, but one or the other. Like I want to say it's the front side. If they in the direction of movement, it'll become like gray and like almost like a white light. And then on the back side, it'll be like a shadow. It'll be really like razor, like a little somebody took a Sharpie, but it looks like a bubble, you blow a bubble, and it just looks like a super like glassy silhouette, but it's like super crystal clear. But like sometimes when they're moving fast, that's when like that white light, I don't think they can like keep up with it, and like it just looks like a glow, and then like you might have a little flash of light off of it, but like you'll see like the silhouette of the arm, and like maybe some of the face, or like you'll get a torso, and like you'll just have like maybe a flash or like a couple of frames in your as they come out, they'll like move, and then like just as quick as you're seeing the silhouette, they go back in the cloak and you can't see them anymore. So what I see is like either that gray, smoky look, or it's like they'll put out like a black shadow in front of them, and you can't see anything in the general area, or it's like crystal clear, like a bubble, with just the slightest hint of like a distortion. But like one of the speakers there was talking about infrasound and all that stuff and how that affects.
Yeah.
And I was super fascinated by that because I hadn't looked out for it or like been really aware of it until like after he said it, and then I like started like it was on my radar, and then I actually got this was like the night before last, or it was like 3 nights ago. My daughter was like well wound up, and I was just trying to get her to bed, and like to anybody listening, I have like a family of Bigfoot living behind my house, and like we have a routine where we go to bed and go upstairs and turn out the lights, and they come spilling out of the woods. So they don't want to interact with us too much, and they just want to like sort of stay in their lane, and so they wait and like before they start feeding, and I put out nuts for them and all that stuff, and everything is cool and smooth, and like, but with this infrasound stuff, like she was wound up, and she was just taking way too long. I think it was like almost 10:30, almost 11 o'clock, and she was just going bonkers, and I was just trying to get her upstairs. And like I heard like this is what I heard, was like a ooh, and like I felt them like sort of like, and then like a second one go ooh, and they both like, I felt it like vibrate my heart and my chest, like two like sticks sort of stabbing through my chest, like one, and then from the side two, just to sort of like nudge me. It's like, get the show on the road, and like they just both sort of nudged me, and then that was it. And like that low, deep, like vibrational sound, but it was like super sharp and focused in one little area, and like my chest was like just like rumbling. It was so crazy. And like it's funny. Like I think a lot of their communication revolves around like this humming they do. Let me make sure I'm staying on track. But oh yeah, I can talk about this. This is one of my points. But there's like a low toned like hum that the female does. Let me backtrack a little bit. There's what I've noticed like since recently out here is like here in Westland is like I was out in the front driveway, and I was listening, see what's going on, and I heard like distinctly like a raspy little baby's cry coming from the woods, maybe like 30 feet out. And I don't know if it was being born or if it was like a newborn, but like either way, it was like I know the sound of a crying baby. It's like it's instinctive, you just know it, and so it was coming from the woods. So I think like the female had another baby, and so like the following day, I got to hear her. I went outside to check on my little garden. As I stepped out, I was real quiet, and I heard her like just in the bushes on the other side of the fence, and she's just humming, soothing the baby, and it was like a like just like that. And I was like, oh my god. And I even felt a little sick. I felt good. I was like, oh shit, baby. But that hum that they do, it's really interesting, and like a tone, and like if they do communicate, it's very rare. Like they don't do it all the time, but when they do, it seems like it's like a and like each hum has like a meaning for something, right? And they're communicating all sorts of stuff inside of like what we would call just like one like a vowel sound or something, or just like one part of a word. It's like a whole sentence is being said inside of one hum. And it was like, it's like there's like the side of it, it's like the terror and like the carnage and like the absolute brutality of like being a wild man, but then they have this totally like human side to it. It's just like magic. And I've learned to just sort of like take it as it comes and not get too wrapped up in the fear of like what they're doing, because like maybe like a lot of stuff when you hear like people talking about they're screaming at each other and it sounded ferocious, and maybe it wasn't ferocious, it was just casual conversation, and they were just talking to their cousins across the valley, and it just sounded intense to us because we just have very like soft middle toned like conversations, and like, but I had a juvenile reveal itself to me, and like what is going on, and I had walked. A lot of my activity happens like around my garden, and so because it's like right up against the forest there, and I had walked up to check on my garden, and it was like 11 o'clock or something, middle of the day, and I just catch a whiff of like fermented pee. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that? And I'm like, I thought maybe I'd like, I was making some plant fertilizer with like the weeds, I thought maybe it was my stuff, but it wasn't. Like the breeze was coming towards me and I'm blowing that smell away. So it wasn't my stuff. And I stood in the garden, I didn't smell it, and all of a sudden I hear like a little twig break, and then like I could hear them move a little bit, and then I could smell like just rotten pee. I go, it smells like rotten pee over here. And I just said it out loud to the bushes. And then he just decides to just go, he gives like a long H sound, so like and then he goes, and it sounds like a bear or something, but like just this long sort of like tone. And
Josh, have you talked to them verbally a lot, or is that a thing where that only happens rarely?
It only happens rarely. I like a couple of times. Like when I first met the female, when I had stuck my head out to see what was like scooching up to my window, because at that point I was still like in sort of like a weird denial state of like the stuff I experienced in Alaska was just in Alaska and it was fine here. But hold on. Pardon me, sorry. I verbally said to the female, like, okay, I'm going to sleep then. And she like waddled her head and like she like sat down and like I went to bed. But for the most part, most of the communication is like through like an eye blink, or like they just use their eyes or something like that to sort of signal to me. But usually it's like an unspoken communication. So you got to sort of go with your gut and what your gut's telling you about what the situation is, and like try not to like project too much into it because like there is that fear factor of like the big giant like hairy man is like looking at me, and it's like it might not be anything, it might just be friendly, you know. And I made the mistake initially with these guys is like assuming the worst and just like eyeballing them and just doing all this aggressive activity just to sort of assert my dominance, and it like sort of snowballed and like created like a situation. But it's all like settled down now. But for the most part, in terms of like communication wise, usually, I mean, they'll whistle at me and stuff like that, but nothing. It's usually just like acknowledging, like they'll like light up one eye or something and just let me see them, and then like they'll just sort of go about their business, just sort of. Like, and I would say I'm right here, and sort of like, you know, just to be respectful, I guess. And but like in terms of communication, you can sometimes hear them. They'll argue with each other, but they'll never like communicate directly with me. And that was the first time since like I saw her, where I just said something to one of them. And so, but getting back to the bush, he gave out the tone, and then he walked. There's a log along my fence. He walked out onto the log where there was no branches like growing out of it, and I got to see him. And like I was standing 6 or 7 feet from him, and he's just like looked at me. And then it was what was surprising was like he was all black. He was one of the juveniles, and I'm pretty sure he's been living off of my nuts, like my handouts, for this entire time. And like I think I try to leave them stuff, and so they'll get nuts and they'll come out on the roof, and I'll watch YouTube videos or something, and they'll come up and just like get in the window. They'll cloak, but yeah, there's probably 6 of them that I've seen, and I can get into that part too. But like the communication stuff has been mostly just like eye gestures. Like if they're mad at me, it's like a broken twig. They'll throw it. But for the most part, they if they're upset, they'll push over a tree or something. Just let me know without like verbally saying anything. But we haven't like communicated directly. Like That was the first time I like just said something.
It's really interesting.
But, yeah. But after that, after he stepped out, it was like suddenly they weren't cloaked. They were like, maybe they'll have a little shade on them, like they'll have that shadow to them, and they'll like slink around more and they'll walk around more. But there's like the cloaking is pretty much stopped now, and like I think they're just focused on like packing calories for winter now. But last winter, I got to describe this guy. I can't just leave you hanging with that. So the thing about like the other Sasquatches I've seen, and like right about now, is like they shed their fur and they start growing the new fur, and it's usually probably like an inch and a half long by now. Some of them are still like bald, got nothing on them, slower growing. But this guy, he had the winter fur, and it had kept growing, and so he had like this crazy mop top, looking like Tina Turner, just crazy long, like wiry hair, like a chimpanzee, but like sticking out straight. It wasn't laying down; it was like sticking out straight, like sideways, but just like flared out all around, and like black skin, black eyes, like everything just totally black, like a little black Bigfoot. He looked at me, I looked at him, and then he walked into the woods. But after that, I started seeing them all over the place because they weren't like cloaked around me during the day. And so when I was putting out nuts, I saw one across the way looking at me, and like he was just trying to hide in plain sight and just sort of see what I was putting out for the night. It's just kids. It was a juvenile, but like he had already knocked off his favorite branch in the neighbor's like driveway. He knocked it clean off, and it was a big branch. And I'm sure they don't know what it is or what knocked down that branch, but like he was in like the one behind the fence, like just past that neighbor's driveway, and he was just watching me. And at first I thought it was my neighbor. I was like, why is the neighbor watching me throw out nuts? Do I have to explain what's going on? Hope not. And then I realized it was one of them. And then like just like a ghost, it just like slides to the out of sight along the fence line, and then it tries to get away. But the problem is it knocked over a bunch of recycling cans. So it was super loud. It had knocked over like the neighbors like recycling, and you just hear the cans rolling all over the side driveway. And it was just a little comical because like he was like trying to be smooth, and then he just totally biffed it. But and then like my wife had we were like at the table. We had just finished, I think we had lunch, and it was like midday. And like right before she came in, into the little dining room, I had the window open. I heard like I think it was 2 solid raps with like a little switch, a branch on my fence, like just the fence post. It was like whap, whap. And then I heard like the big female start to move, and then like nothing. So then my wife comes in, she sits down, we're chatting and like we're eating her lunch. And then I like a minute later, there's like a juvenile. I got a full shot side view of a juvenile, and like it looks like any other 10-year-old kid except for the little bump. And I think that I might have seen the sagittal ridge finally, but like the way the neck rested on the skull, it just looked like Neanderthal, or like a sort of like it had like a big back part of the skull. But like most like Europeans, they'll have like a much flatter back part of their skulls, much less pronounced, except for like the Hungarians. But this it had a really long like backside of the skull, like just like Neanderthal. It was like a long skull. The heavy brow line, but then the nose was like modern looking, and like the cheeks were full, and it just looked like a 10-year-old kid. But he was just going to see what Mama was doing. But like his skin was like bald. There was no hair on him at all. It was just a little bit of a cone on the head, and like maybe like an inch and a half off the base of the head. Not very big, but like just a little bit poking off the top. And like, and I said to my wife, okay, look. And she's like looking around. She's not seeing anything. All of a sudden, like he just passes by. And then she finally catches the backside of him as he's moving through the woods. And she finally got to see a little Bigfoot like slinking through the woods, going to see what Mom wants. And like, it was like, and you're just like, it's like vindication. It just felt so good to just finally have that moment where she was always just like sort of blowing me off about the whole thing and being on the fence, and now she had to acknowledge it,
because that was the first time she's seen one, correct?
Yeah, actually seeing one, and even still, I think pride is like, he kicks in. She doesn't want to. It's like, are you still talking about that? I'm just like, I can't get over how I got you to see a Bigfoot. Whatever. But it just felt so good. Like, um, but just a lot of that stuff has just been like crazy. Like the mood's changed. Um, beforehand, I mean, I can get into the other stuff uh, that I need to talk about. I know beforehand the mother had I kept making eye contact. Like when at night she would go at the beginning of the summer, she would go out, get up into one of the trees and start looking for deer. And like I would be looking out the window and I would like see a light here and there and like try not to look at it and stuff. But they get so mad because they're trying so hard to focus on what they're doing and they gotta scan when they're looking for animals. They gotta scan and they gotta be methodical and they it's not like us where we're like peripheral and like we just like there it is and just like we're just like we shoot arrows and throw spears and stuff so we like pinpoint peripherally like they have to like meticulously like scan left to right and like it's radar or something. Like just they'll do it real slow and they'll just do it the same way back and forth until they see something. And but it's they get so mad because like I pop out and I just like immediately pinpoint on them and look at them and I just sort of break their concentration and like when they get mad they sort of like give like a little and then like they just shake their head in rage and like just like big head shakes and they'll rock back and their head shaking their heads and then like they'll climb down or whatever and then just get mad. But this time I did it. I didn't know I was doing it. I sort of like fell asleep in the guest bedroom and it was facing the back side of the house and I had woke up at about like 2 in the morning. I just woke up, sat up for a second. The blinds are open. I'm just like looking. I see, I'm just looking around. I'm sort of tired. I'm like, look over. I see like this glowing light, and I'm like, it's flickering. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I go, I hope something's not on fire. I thought it was a fire, and so I look over, and I'm looking at it harder, and then I see the two, what looks like it starts to like flicker and it looked like it was on a tree. I was like, oh my gosh. I thought it was one of the schools were on fire or something. And I was like, oh, am I supposed to, do I need to call 911? I'm looking at it and then all of a sudden like I don't see it anymore. And then I see it again and it looks like headlights. I'm like, oh, it was just a car, I guess. Car up a tree? No, that doesn't make sense. Oh, it's the female. Oh, I better not. I better stop looking. And so, but she was crossing fields, swinging between trees, jumping on roof lines, making a beeline straight for me. She was so mad, and like I'm laying down and looking up, and like there's like red light just like flickering on the wall, and like the all the brush between me and her. She was probably like a mile out, and she was like, covering ground. It was just like you just see it like bobbing as she was like moving straight for me, and I look again, and it's her, and like she beams me, and like my eyes just fill up with like this red light, and I'm starting to feel like the energy like just like bouncing around inside my like eyeball, like I felt the heat on my skin, like it was different. It was different than their like normal light, passive light, where you just feel maybe it's reflective. This was like they were emitting a light and it was like warm and I could feel the heat in my eyeball and I was starting to see red around everything and it was starting to get intense and it was starting to I was starting to only see red. So I looked away as much as I could and I just decided like I need to disengage and just close my eyes and just go lay down. Just lay down and like not like escalate this any further. And like I heard her finally like get to the forest behind the house, and she's like moving through, and I just hear her like creeping. I was looking, waiting for me to like pop my eyes open and just look at her, and like I knew just to go to sleep, and it would be fine. And it was, but like anytime I would like look around, I would just see her like just get really aggressive and like just like follow me in the brush. If I sat down, she'd like look, and I could see her eyes without the light on, but like she'd look at me, make sure I'm not doing anything funny, and like the ISR on was on me for like a good while. So finally now, after she had that baby, it's been like super mellow. I think she's just in a good mood, but like haven't had any problems. Everything's just smooth and like smooth as butter, and I've learned to just not like see that like if I see it in my peripheral, don't look at it. Just focus on what I'm doing. Don't look at the light. Like I'll glance over for a second, but I don't look back. I just let her do her thing and just sort of like try to stay in my lane. But they get really frustrated when you're like looking at them while they're trying to do their thing.
Mm.
I mean, I could speculate, maybe it's like an ADD thing or something. Like they're wired for that, and like that's what works for them. And like that might explain why like some people have ADD these days. It's just like some throwback mindset that actually worked in like the wild that kept us alive. But it's been like just a matter of like really just like trying to like respect their boundaries while they try to respect mine. And like another time previous to that was like this was I think this was I can get into the coyote story. That's a good one. But I think it was just after New Year's. I think there had just been like a really hard like ice storm that like had blown through Westland, and like there was like patches of snow on the ground, but like there was just like a biting like a cold wind like blowing through constantly, and like most of the snow had melted off from like that ice storm, but there were still like patches, so I could see like parts of the forest, and when the juveniles were running through, I could see them a little better because they were backlit by the snow. And it was, I think it was might have been a full moon, because a pack of coyotes had been like howling that night, and like suddenly got quiet, and I'm hearing, I can sort of I'm like hearing stuff, and I'm like sitting on a beanbag. I'm just in my back room, just like listening, and I fell asleep for a second, and I woke up, and I heard the yowls of like a whole pack of like coyotes, and they were like right over the fence and like right in the bushes. And I like get up, I'm like, oh my gosh, like a rabid pack of coyotes just thrashing around. And like what had happened was the big male had gotten all the coyotes to get on him, and like you could hear him like running through the woods and just grabbing them, and like he's just thrashing around back and forth, and like he's got like that black like shade up, so I can't see anything, but like I got the window open, I'm just listening to this whole thing. I'm like nose against the window, just like, oh my gosh. And like I'm listening to all this like as each coyote is like getting crushed, and then like you hear the yelps like, and they're just like melting off one by one, and then like the rest of the group would like get them and like bring them back, and then like just like one by one, just like they would melt off, and then like you'd hear another one just like catch them and like snap their neck or whatever, and then they I don't know how many coyotes were there, but there was a lot. There had to have been more than a baker's dozen. I mean, it could have been like 20 of them. It was a lot, and like they were just within like 45 seconds, the entire like pack was dead, was done, and wiped out. And I haven't seen any coyotes since. No sign, no poop, nothing like that. And but I could hear, like, I was just like looking and just trying to like see what's going on. As I go to the other window, see if I can get a better angle at what's going on, and like the snow's backlit, and the juveniles start noticing I'm watching, and so then they come out and like they're gesturing back to dad or whatever, and I can hear him just like smacking on Coyote. You just hear him like chewing the meat, and it's just like just really getting down. And like midwinter, probably, I bet that was a welcome meal for them. But
wow, that's really
just
intense.
listening. Yeah, and I'm just listening to it, and all of a sudden, there's about 6 juveniles, and they're all like poofed out. The hair is about 3 inches long or something, but they look like little poof balls. Got little cones, maybe like 3 or 4 inches long, not very big. But their eyes are glowing, and they're backlit by the snow, and they're all just like looking back at the dad, and like they're looking at me, and then like they're all dancing around, and just like I could just see all of them like right there, and they're like just maybe like 10 feet, and they're all looking, and I got the window open, and I'm like sort of pressed against like the window screen, and like trying to like see if I can see something, and all of a sudden I just hear the smacking stop, because just like the kids aren't eating the food, and so then all of a sudden I hear a stomp, and then like a stomp, 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 and he starts to run, like he's starting to book it at me. I'm like, okay, so I turn around, and I just disengage. But like ever since then, like that's what happened. So like by the time you get to the story with the female and like the eyes and all that stuff, it's just like it's been a little like touch and go for the most part. But those 6 little like juveniles, they'll come right up to the window, and they'll be cloaked, but I'll know they're there because like their eyes will catch the shine. But they've been entertained by me this entire time. And so all I've been trying to do is like, I know like if there's some animosity towards me, oh wow, we got an eye shine. One of them was watching me. That's cool. Yeah, I know that like they're gonna get bigger, and I'd rather have like 6 of them in my corner instead of like all of them pissed at me. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
I've been just like throwing nuts out. I'm like, you guys like pecans, and so they'll come up and they'll watch YouTube. They'll be smacking on nuts, and like you could hear them like cracking the shells, and like the almonds, you could hear them like split them in half as they're like chewing on them. They'll just get their back right up against the wall, and there's like a little roof line that's like cuts down right below the window, and so they'll just be hanging out right there. And just the other day they were I caught an eye flash, and I realized there was like all 4 of them were like pressed against the glass, watching me hang out on the computer. And like sometimes when they want a little more, or they don't know what I'm doing, they'll 1 or 2 from the back will be like, they'll give like a ooh, ooh, and like they give little who sounds of like hearing what I'm doing, or just they want to know what's going on, and that tells me like someone else is watching me right now. So I just learn to just like roll with it and just accept that they're just curious.
Mm-hmm.
And so
wow,
yeah, a lot of things. Oh, like this will lead into another part. I had put out one of those, like, you get those rotisserie chickens from the store.
Yep.
I like pulled off all the parts, and I took the carcass and I just threw it out there with all the peanuts, and like I guess they got into that, and like this was like 3 or 4 days to go, but like then all of a sudden I just hear all of them giving pigeon calls. Like I think there was about 4 or 5 of them trying to call in a flock of pigeons because they were like they got a taste of that bird meat and they wanted more, and so they were just trying to like call in a bird. But it's like I said, it's just like it's a carnage, and then it's magic. I'm like, I don't know, man. It's like I don't know how I feel, but if you ever wanted to come,
so I was just gonna mention it is really interesting to look at your entire story and see where you've come from, which what happened in Alaska was very traumatic for you, and then at what's happening current day, like there's some really cool stuff happening, and you're definitely able to slowly move into a different type of relationship, it seems, with them down in your area, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when you hear the stories and they talk about it, they'll have only a handful of experiences, but they don't get a second chance to just really like interact again. And like they'll have like this, because it's so traumatic, they'll have like this dark look on it when maybe it wasn't as dark as they thought, and like it's like to us, like peeking in somebody's window, that's being a creep, but to them, they're just curious.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know those boundaries, because if they didn't like you just like you wouldn't be around to like really like say, oh, that was a bad experience. They would just get you, And if you're still alive after that experience, you just like take it as is,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a warning, but sometimes it's more positive than you realize. And but yeah, it's like you got like I gotta remind myself that like it's just business, A lot of it is just business.
That's very interesting, Josh. It's been really insightful to hear from you again and to talk to you again and hear about what is currently going on over there with you on the coast. But thank you so much for coming back on the show and for hanging out again. We'll be seeing you next summer back in Oakridge. If all goes right for both of us, should be seeing you there. So, but
for sure.
Thanks again, man.
Yep, and just remember, just keep banging the drum. A lot of skeptics are just skeptics, and they're always going to be skeptics. But there's a lot of people. Most people aren't going to be persuaded by facts or knowledge. They're going to be persuaded by the crowd. And you just got to get enough people on board, and those people will flip over, and suddenly the skeptics just go away. And it's about a lot of it's about banging the drum more so than like how much evidence you can bring to the table. I mean, you could look at like the colossal squid or gorillas for that matter. It took 100 years for them to like acknowledge gorillas, but here we are, So just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing good work, and I appreciate the show.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.